Please welcome to the stage Senior Director Analyst Robert Blaisdell and Director Advisory, Gartner Research and Advisory, Alice Walmesley.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Robert Blaisdell.
My name's Alice Walmesley, and we are delighted to welcome you to the Gartner CSO and Sales Leader Conference for 2023.
We're so excited to spend the next 2 days with you. We have some amazing research and insights that we are very excited to share with you. But also, this is the first time we've been able to put this conference on since 2019. So to see people face to face, to catch up with old relationships with folks you haven't seen in years. And personal story, Alice and I have worked together for the last 3.5 years. We've co-authored research, we've created client engagements, we've prepared for this keynote. And I actually got to meet her face-to-face for the first time 2 nights ago. And it's been so much fun, sharing photos, talking about families, and just getting to know each other a little bit better in a different environment that we were in 2019.
And really, it reminds us that there is some unique value about having us as humans all here together. And that's what we're going to start this keynote with. With this keynote, prioritizing the human touch, connecting the buyer, seller, and sales leader of the future. And across the next 45 minutes, Robert and I are going to unpack this. We're going to be looking at what the uniquely human role looks like in an evolving technology landscape. And we'll also introduce you to some of the key themes that you're going to see across the conference. One of the big ones being about accelerating commercial performance in an environment of accelerating change. And this is where our story starts, with a look at change that has accelerated and continues to accelerate to unprecedented levels. The last 3 years in particular have been a real roller coaster. We've had change after change after change. A pandemic, a war, a whole host of other social and geopolitical disruptions that impact our everyday lives, as well as those of our buyers and sellers.
And at the same time, there's been a revolution in technology. There are things happening that we couldn't even imagine 3 years ago, that are changing the way we work, the way we sell, and the way our customers buy. Our sellers are working more remotely. Generative AI has landed on the landscape, and we now even have machine customers outreaching to us as suppliers.
Now, alongside, and because of all this really, we've also seen huge amounts of economic disruption, rising interest rates, supply chain challenges. Inflation is sky high. And when we take this all together, and as we think about what we're going to be looking at over the next 2 days specifically in the world of B2B buying and selling, we're seeing very real implications here for how we sell and for how our buyers buy. Because the world is changing. It's changed a lot, and it continues to change. And the old playbook no longer works as it once did. In fact, we've discovered a whole new North Star for effective selling altogether, not because selling has changed, but because buying has changed.
And those changes are putting our revenue goals at risk. And they're at risk for 3 distinct reasons.
Now, the first is the result of the shift that we've seen to digital. And we think about the experiences that we all have every single day as consumers. And that carries over to what our customers expect of us in a B2B setting. A massive 75% of our buyers, 3/4 of our buyers, say that if they could, they would prefer to buy a complex B2B purchase without engaging with a sales rep at all. Now, this is scary for a couple of reasons, because on one hand, it's hard for us to get in front of them and influence them. But on the other hand, as we likely all know, buyers need engagement from sellers in order to make good decisions, because when they don't engage with sellers, they miss critical pieces of information, important steps along the purchase journey, and that then means that they're much more likely to regret the purchase as a result. What we see is that when buyers seek this digital experience independently, they're undoing their own ability to make good business decisions, and we're all losing out as a result.
And maybe not unsurprisingly, another thing that is putting our revenue goals at risk is pervasive pessimism. Your buyers are operating in an environment in which headline after headline, many of them that we just showed, is really painting a negative picture. 76% of buyers are worried about a recession. And that worry is making them buy less delay the purchase, and that's if they even make a purchase at all. And what that is doing to us is it's eroding margins.
Now, what's more, buyers are much more likely to abandon a purchase when they're uncertain. We're in this environment of unrelenting uncertainty. And in this environment, buyers are twice as likely to just give up and abandon a purchase. Because really, without help, why wouldn't they? When you don't know what the economy is going to look like in 6 months, when you don't know what your own business's priorities are going to look like, it just doesn't make sense to make a large purchase. There's too much risk there. Now, combined, these different dynamics are a recipe for dysfunction. Because as many as 55% of buyers are experiencing dysfunction when they're making decisions. And we see this every single day. How often do we see it when our buyers struggle to make decisions, when they struggle to align as one of these big, complex buying groups? Where they perhaps cherry pick pieces of information rather than going for the things that we know are most important to them in making a decision. And it goes back to something that we all know to be true. These are human buyers that we're talking about, human beings. And when humans make decisions, they're conflicted by emotions and fears. Fears of messing up, fears of missing out, fears of making the wrong decision. And you put this all together, and it's no surprise that dysfunction is completely killing deals. Because in fact, buyers that experience dysfunction as a group are as much as 74% less likely to make a high-quality purchase. 74% less likely. Now, a high-quality deal is the kind of business that we want to win. This is when a customer goes for the ambitious premium version of the offering rather than settling for one of those small, good enough purchases. And we see this every day. We see it when it falls out of our pipeline. We see it when they close the smaller deals that we don't want to sell, they don't want to buy. Now, this isn't just happening once or twice. It's not just for some of us in this room. This is the norm. So what can we do about it?
Well, our traditional approach and our normal approach as sales leaders is to deal with this dysfunction with our sellers. It's to rely on our sellers. And why wouldn't we? They are our most flexible, our most important, our most valuable, and in many cases, our most expensive asset to leverage against this. And we do this in the right way with all the best intentions to hit our goals. But this approach moving forward is not the playbook that we need to run because things have changed and there's some real barriers, some real challenges with leveraging our sellers as much as we do moving forward. And it's not working for 3 reasons. 1, many of us are in a technology trap. We've made investments, in some cases massive investments, to improve the performance of our sellers, to get them to hit their quota, to exceed results. We're spending more and more, but we're getting less and less because oftentimes our best of intentions of more technology is contributing to a lot of their burden. And it's causing a lot of burnout, which is also impacting the second factor, a talent roller coaster. All of us in this room have probably experienced something in regards to the talent roller coaster. Whether it's quiet quitting, the great resignation, levels of seller burnout that we have not seen historically. This roller coaster is really impacting our ability as sales leaders to position our sellers for success. And it's only going to get worse because as Gen Z enters the workforce, they're having a huge influence on how we are changing the roles and having to adapt. And coupled with that, many baby boomers have retired or nearing retirement. There are some major shifts in the labor workforce overall, but in particular how it pertains to sales. And then finally, a persistent skills gaps. Having an enablement background, I understand the challenges as sales organizations we have in keeping up with our customer needs. The adapting the way our sellers sell and our sales organizations position ourselves, it's hard enough for us to keep up with them, let it get ahead. We're always on our back foot. Now, we are doing a lot of good things. In the short term, we can be successful. Many of you are successful, but you put these factors together and we've created a system that's about to break. We've created a system where that talent roller coaster may be going off its track. This system will break. Now, I've taken you through the valley of despair. I've taken you through like, great, Robert, what are we gonna do? Well, Alice, I think there is hope. And the thing we have to keep in mind as we go through the hope is we can't solve 2023 challenges with 2019 solutions.
And to that end, there are 3 parts to our solution. The first that we're going to look at is the tech revolution. Because just as the world's becoming completely impossible for our sellers to navigate, thankfully, technology presents new opportunities. What we're going to explore today is how technology plays a new role, one of a teammate to sellers. But that then leaves us asking, what does that mean for our sellers? What does it mean for the human beings that engage with our customers? And that takes us to the second part, the human edge. Because there are some uniquely human capabilities that our sellers have that can't be replaced and shouldn't be replaced. But the real magic happens in that third area, when we take the two together, the tech revolution and the human edge. And this is the future. And this isn't something that's going to be happening in 10 years, 5 years. Even with the things that are possibility right now, it can start today. Now, we're going to unpack these one by one. Let's start with the tech revolution.
Diving a little bit deeper into the technology revolution. Technology has always been on a path of evolution. But truly in the last 2 to 3 years, and maybe even 6 to 8 months, there's been a revolution in what technology can do for sales leaders. And we've been making investments. In fact, up to this point, we've been making massive investments. And those massive investments are represented here today in this room. We got a copy of the registration list, and we looked out the technology spend from a sales perspective that's represented here. And it equals $3.5 billion. Look to your left, look to your right. We as a group in here are spending $3.5 billion to improve our sellers' productivity. Now that's not your IT spend, that's not your CRM, that's not your laptops, that's not your infrastructure. That is your spend as sales leaders in this room trying to improve sales outcomes, seller performance. We're spending a lot, but we're not getting the returns that we want. Where is it gone? Why are we doing this? Well, I want to introduce you to a framework, a maturity curve of where many of us are on this journey and how we want to think about where we are and where we can go. So we're all probably tackling simple automation. As you look at the index, from left to right, you see human beings making more decisions, having more ownership on the left, and as you move to the right, humans don't make as many decisions, technology, artificial intelligence does. And you see a productivity moving up the x-axis. We're all doing simple automation. We have technology in place that alleviates some of the burden of sellers that are the menial tasks. Data entry into the CRM maybe. Maybe it's managing their calendar. Maybe it's task tracking. A variety of technologies out there that do it, and many of us are making investments there. Now, we move up. We get to a stage of assisted selling. And assisted selling is where technology is really assisting the seller in completing a lot of the outreach, the tasks that need to be done. In this case, oftentimes emails can be automatically sent. The outreach from artificial intelligence and the technology embedded can be done at a push of a button. It's alleviating more and more from the seller's burden. But the decisions are being made more by machines. Now we move up to another level, automated selling. This is where more and more are taken off of the seller's shoulders to get done. And technology has a greater ownership to where now when they would walk in and they have to do 30 things, artificial intelligence is saying, no, do these 4 things. I've already taken care of the other 6. It's there today. It's doing it for them. And then finally, we reach the top of the curve, autonomous selling. And many of us are making investments to get here. Many of us are making investments to say, let me alleviate all this from my sellers. Let me let the machines make the decisions. Where now the role of the seller is more of a guide. It's more of a stage gate to make sure things don't go out wrong. Or they're the filter. Or they only prioritize maybe 1 or 2 outreaches. That is the nirvana, the pinnacle that we're all searching for and trying to achieve. But Alice, maybe there's a little bit of surprise here. Or maybe people would say it's not so surprising.
I think the problem here is that for most of us, we've never reached our goal. For most of us, we've hit a dead end at assisted selling. We do make progress, but it's far harder. far more expensive, far more painful than we really expected. And why is that? Why did we get stuck? Well, it turns out that we've inadvertently created a bottleneck by running everything through our sellers. We've treated technology as a tool to assist our sellers, to help them navigate the buying environment. But in our efforts to support them with the proliferation of technology, tools, and platforms, we've actually ended up overwhelming them to the point that they need entirely new skills and behaviors on top of those that we were intending to assist. The things that we thought would make the job of a seller easier have inadvertently made the job harder. It's one step forward and two steps back. Now, we can only break this cycle with a new paradigm for how we look at technology, where we shift from treating technology as a tool that helps sellers navigate this buying environment to one where we enable tech to navigate the buying environment, where we recognize technology as a teammate, and we enable that team member to navigate the buying environment. Now, this is the step change in productivity that we're going to see, where we start recognizing the technology as a teammate to the seller. In a nutshell, the tech revolution is not about giving your sellers more technology. It's about giving that technology more responsibility. Stop treating technology as a tool, start treating technology as a teammate.
That's a great statement. But why haven't we done that to this point? Or why have we hit a roadblock, a proverbial dead end? Well, there's a lot of technology to choose from out there. But in particular, in the last few months, there are 3 new technologies that really make this step change possible. 1, generative AI, ChatGPT. It's going to save the world or conquer the world or destroy the world. We read it in every headline. It's passing law exams. It's getting into MBA schools. It can think better than a human. I debate that. But it is going to have a major impact on the business world, and it's going to have a major impact in B2B selling. It's going to be able to curate content. It's going to be identify trends. It's already doing that, and it's learning. Now, anyone who says where it's going, we have to think about that. Like, well, what do we know? What do we do? But the ramp up. Back in November, no one knew, or little knew, what generative AI was. Now, you couple that with emotion AI, emotional artificial intelligence. Now, I'm going to tell you humans can read humans better than anyone, and again, we've talked about this is the benefit of being in the room together. But emotion AI allows sellers to be even better at reading that. As I'm engaging with you virtually, or in some cases face-to-face, I'm missing things. Because I'm a human, I can only process so much. But what emotion AI does is it reads your cues. It reads your body language, it reads your eye contact, and it's giving me feedback in how I can adjust to your buyer sentiment. And it can be real time or it can be post time, but it's amazing how much the technology in this case doesn't replace, it enhances the seller's human abilities. And then finally, digital humans. Now, I am not suggesting that we are all going to be replaced by robots, or that your sellers are all going to be replaced by robots, although you may want a few of your sellers to be replaced by robots. And nor am I saying that the large, complex B2B deals will really be taken over by digital humans. But if you think about the more transactional business, the smaller tier customers, the simple things, the early pipeline, the opportunity assessment, identification, and nurturing, that's where digital humans can really take a greater role in the sales process and change the way. You put these 3 things together, and now we have an ability that we haven't had before previously to have a step change in seller productivity. And one of those areas really comes down to what are they doing? Where are they spending their time? Alice?
And this is something that is a big priority for all of us. How do our sellers spend their time? What you're looking at on the screen now is data that comes from our seller time spend assessment, looking into how sellers spend their time across a typical month. Now, I think when we look at this, and if we were designing the role today, it probably would not look anything like this.
I don't know if it's chunky or smooth, but it's a peanut butter strategy. They're all doing the same thing. It's spread so evenly. There's no differentiation or focus.
Now, as we look at this and we think about all those things that are taking up our sellers' time, the amounts of preparation they have to do, the researching, the admin, the reporting, the analytics, it leaves very little time for what we'd think of as actual selling. Now, the good news is that the technology revolution can transform this. It can transform how sellers spend their time. Let's start with prospecting, just as one example. It's a core part of the seller job, takes up about 15% of their time, typically. And for most of them, it's something that they really don't enjoy. They avoid it when they possibly can, and when they do it, it's kind of, doing what they need to get by. But technology has the chance to change this.
Yes. The number of inquiries we take on pipeline or prospecting is quite high. It's the number one concern of most sales leaders. How do I improve, increase my pipeline? How do I make it more efficient? How do I change the way my sellers are prospecting? And again, you've made a lot of investments. We've made some great changes in this. There's now an ability for sellers to target the right prospects better. Technology is already saying, don't worry about these so much. Do this, reach out to them. We've also been able to personalize, tailor a little bit more. Now, it's still on the shoulders of the sellers, but we're getting better at that based on buyer sentiment analysis and where they've been in their buyer journey. And then finally, we're better at streamlining the prospecting process and follow-up. We're consistent. Things don't fall through the cracks as much. A lot of technology out there that monitors a lot of those stages. But the future really changes some things. To the point where, great, your sellers don't want to prospect, or they just put minimal effort into it, take it off their shoulders. There's now autonomous prospecting. Artificial intelligence gets smart enough to where it's sending the right content at the right time to the right person based on all the data that it has in place, and it learns. You now have dynamic customer campaigns to where it's a lot of the tailoring has been individual. You're now able to set that up into which your segments and tiers are more targeted, and it changes as the buyers change. And then finally, you have unified commercial prospecting approach. As sales leaders, I'm sure we all have great stories or horror stories about how things aren't aligned through the prospecting process. The website says one thing, the seller says another, the digital content says another thing. You now have an ability to monitor that, make that more consistent. So you're one voice to your customers and to your prospects. And it alleviates a lot of this burden, this manualness from sellers. And when we do that, Alice, it's pretty profound.
We can really change how they spend their time. It's not just about burden, but it's about what they're spending their time on. And we can see a shift from what we see on the left there to more like what we see on the right, where we can free up a whole ton of extra bandwidth through the use of technology. Now, we're predicting approximately 27% extra bandwidth, which then left us asking, what do we do with it?
I bet everyone's thinking right now, more sales calls. I've found 27% bandwidth. Let's engage with the customer more. Let's do more sales calls. That'd be my assumption.
And I think it's probably the same for a lot of us. And if we think about how we actually maximize the return on investment for that extra bandwidth, it's maybe slightly different to what we expected. Because yes, we do have extra bandwidth to be spending in front of customers, but when we look at what customers are saying, what we saw earlier on, 75% of customers saying if they could, they'd avoid talking to us at all. So what does that then mean? It means something that you're probably suspecting to be true. It's not just about the time that we spend with our customers. It's about what we do in that time. It's about quality over quantity. Because a really interesting finding from our research was actually something quite different to what we expected. So a lot of us assume that there's going to be positive correlation. The more time we spend in front of our customers, the higher our chances of performance. But actually, when we looked at this against our seller time spend assessment, no matter how we cut the data, we found no statistically significant relationship between seller time spend and customers. Sorry, seller time spend and performance when it comes to the time that they spend in front of customers.
So my assumption was wrong.
I'm afraid so, Robert.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say a lot of other folks in the audience might have been wrong.
But what we need to do then is look at the high performer approach. We need to look at the quality that high performers are delivering over the quantity. Because it's not just about what our customers are saying they want anymore, it's also about what is going to be best for us to deliver in that time. Now let's look at how the high performers are already doing this.
So we've rounded out our technology revolution section. It's about making technology a teammate. We're going to dive deeper into the human edge. Because again, if they're not spending more time, what should the humans be doing? Well, you're going to see they're actually going to do more by doing less. It's the main takeaway from this next section. Doing more by doing less. And we start off with the human edge of saying, again, what do the high performers do? There were dots on that actual chart that had low customer engagement but high performance. And it turns out there were two main themes that we looked at with what higher performers do. One, they elevate buyer feelings. They don't suppress them. They don't overwhelm them with facts. They supply them. But they elevate how the buyer is feeling. And think about it. There's a lot riding on some of these large B2B purchases. Couple that with the buying group and a lot of the dysfunction that we shared earlier. High performers know they have to elevate this. Secondly, they focus their attention wisely. And I would say they focus their attention ruthlessly. And this isn't a factor of time. It's now that I am engaging with the customer and I've elevated their buying feelings, how do I do that? What do I do that? Put these two things together. And we found a really interesting trend in some of our B2B buyer research. That even in the large, complex B2B world, where you think things were being driven by rational, it's actually feelings over facts.
And it translates to huge commercial returns for us. In fact, in our research, what we found is that when buyers feel confident in their decision, when they feel that they've been understood by suppliers, they are as much as 30% more likely to make the high-quality purchase, so that bigger premium offering, which is going to lead to better margins for us. Now, we call this value affirmation, helping buyers validate that the purchase is right for them and that they feel confident about their decision. As you'll see over on the right-hand side, it's not just about how buyers feel, not just about what buyers know, it's about what they feel, as you see just there. Now, when we take this together, it's a very human thing that we're observing here. Buyers feeling in control of the purchase. Buyers feeling understood. Things that we all need in our everyday lives, but even more so when so much risk is on the table. Now, when we look at this, it really seems to be the exact antithesis of the state of dysfunction that we saw our buyers facing earlier. And so feelings have the chance to enhance or erode the kind of deal that gets done, and actually whether a deal gets done in the first place. So value affirmation is something that we all need to optimize towards, because this is what drives sustainable growth. But now we need to think about how we actually deliver that, because it turns out that our human sellers are uniquely positioned to deliver this over and above the digital experiences.
And this is where the impact of your most valuable, flexible, and important asset comes to bear. When your buyers engage with your human sellers, they are 2.3 times, again, 2.3 times more likely to experience value affirmation. And to reinforce what Alice said, there's a 30% lift in the likelihood of that customer completing a high-quality deal. It's the uniqueness that your human sellers can provide. Again, when we look at the high performers,
it's interesting. When we think about why this is, there is something that our high performers are doing very differently. Because it turns out that to influence a customer and get them to feel good about a decision, we've got to understand what's going on inside their heads in the first place. And we debated this at length.
Yes.
Trying to figure out, is this something that can machines do this? Is this something that we can just let machines do? Or is this something that humans are uniquely positioned to deliver? And it turns out that machines can approximate this, at least on some level. But actually, it's only by being human can you really understand, truly understand, the feelings, the frustrations, the experiences that buyers go through when they make a purchase.
And that's because buying, even in B2B buying, is human. Think about the career limiting or career making decisions that these individuals are making, and they're dealing with all that dysfunction. You're making million-dollar purchases and really estimating the ROI. It's always been in the consumer world, but now we're seeing it in the B2B world and acknowledging that they're human. So again, when we look at the high performers who elevate the buyer feelings, they're doing some specific things. One, they're actively listening. And if you've been in sales longer than 30 minutes, you're probably looking at me right now and saying, of course. But we've tried this. Many of us get our sellers here, and many of us don't. Because you do have to listen to what the customer says, figure out their goals, match their solutions. But if you stop right there, where many of us do, you're not going to get the return on the unique human edge that your high-performing sellers and some of your core sellers can deliver. Because as we move up this pyramid,
There's so much that they don't say. There's so much that people don't say that's so important to us understanding how they feel. Our best sellers are the ones that can understand not just what a buyer says, but what they think. They read between the lines to make sure that they're getting a view into what is going on inside this customer's head. And we call this perspective taking. Now, as we continue up to the kind of the higher levels of this understanding, it's also not just about what a buyer says, not just about what a buyer thinks. It's also about what a buyer feels.
yes. Now, empathy. Again, you've been in sales longer than 30 minutes, you're going to have heard empathy. Feelings. And I can't see everyone, but I'm sure the eyes are rolling. Empathy selling. I need my sellers to be more empathetic. I need to have them understand how the customer is. Our term is empathy hacking, and this is different because there is a lot of understanding. But with empathy hacking, it's now action-oriented. I'm making some assumptions. I'm making some hypotheticals. I'm deciding what to do to influence how that customer feels. Where in the past, it might have been like, yeah, they're a little concerned. Now, what do you do with that? That's the high-level behavior that we're seeing these high performers demonstrate outside of all the discussions that we've had for many years around being more empathetic. And then when you reach the top of the pyramid, Alice,
We call this cognitive decoding. And this is about understanding how a buyer is likely to act before they've even acted that way. And this is what our best sellers do. When you think about those sellers that you could fairly describe as like buyer whisperers, the ones that seem to know exactly what a buyer is thinking and feeling and what they're going to do, and they tune their response accordingly. They're trusted advisors because of their ability to connect with these buyers on such a human level. Now imagine what you're probably thinking here is, okay, so think about my talent strategy here. I need to be hiring for this, I need to be training towards this, I need to be enabling for this. But unfortunately, a struggle that we're going to come up against is just how much is already on the plates of our sellers. The job of a seller has become so big.
yes. In fact, spending years, 20 plus years in sales prior to this, and even having an enablement background, I was guilty of this. And this is what we're guilty of. We are overloading our sellers. We're putting boulder upon boulder upon boulder of making them try to be successful. It's a strategy of more. Those sellers can handle that. They're tough. Oh, they'll figure it out. And your high performers do. Don't get me wrong. We've covered that. But these boulders that are weighing down the sellers are what are keeping your core performers from really demonstrating the behaviors of high performers. It's a burden that we've done it to ourselves. And again, for good intent, we got a lot to do, and so do they. But it's so challenging to be successful. As a matter of fact, I mean, you could look at this, well, this is the recipe. These are all the ingredients. We need these boulders.
But it's not a recipe for success. This is a recipe for burnout. Our sellers are completely exhausted.
So here's the exciting piece, and the sales leaders in the room. With what we've covered in the technology space, we now have an opportunity to look towards the seller of the future, where the seller's role is so different than in the past. And it has to be, or they will not be successful. Now, the boulders fell. They don't all disappear. But we have an opportunity to rebuild it with a level of focus that's now going to allow them not to spread their time and their efforts like peanut butter, but to get really good at the things that matter most. And without that, we're just going to add more. We showed you a pyramid. You're like, oh, great, I got to add cognitive decoding to it. No. You've got to take things away and take things off of that seller role. Now, we have some suggestions. Everyone's organization is going to look different from a competency model, a skill set model, as you rebuild that seller role. But the takeaway here is, number one, there are less boulders. Technology and our decisions as sales leaders eliminate some of those things that are truly weighing down our sellers. And in particular, we know these are the behaviors that are really driving higher performance, and in some cases, differentiating the seller behavior. Again, some of your other yellow boulders may be different. But we encourage you to really think about the unique human traits that we have found that high performers are demonstrating in this environment, and how you can really begin to narrow the focus of the role for your core sellers.
And this is exciting, right? We have the opportunity to rebuild the seller role to one that's actually going to help buyers and ones that our sellers want to do. There's so much opportunity here. And it comes with taking advantage of technology to remove some of those distractions, some of those frustrations from the seller's plate. So that firstly, they have enough time to be delivering the right things. So that we kind of force their attention on the right things, because with the right time, with the right focus, when we put the two together, we get high performance. We allow our sellers to unleash their uniquely human capabilities that have been limited for so long by all of the things that they're having to do. Now, to make this a reality and to get our core performers acting a lot more like our high performers, we actually need to make a shift in the performance curve.
And it really impacts our talent approach. Many of you all have seen a performance curve before. You have number of sellers compared to performance. And your high performers and your low performers are in the tails. They're the small numbers. And you have your core performers in the middle. And for years, we've talked about shifting the curve. Document what your high performers are doing, and through additional training, additional enablement, additional support, through a strategy of more, you're going to shift the curve. The challenge with that is we have these barriers, this overwhelming set of roles and responsibilities that are keeping your core performers from moving beyond that barrier. Your high performers figure it out, but we've created environments because we've overburdened them. The new approach to this is not shift the curve, but to tear down the barriers, to poke holes if you can't tear it all the way down, to narrow that focus, which now allows your core performers to move across where that original set of barriers were to that high performance curve. It's a big change in how we've been thinking about the talent approach, and how that then modifies who you recruit, who you hire, how you onboard, who you retain, and how you ultimately get them to exceed their performance goals.
In a nutshell, maximizing sellers' impact relies on asking them to do less, not more. Really, the upside of this tighter role focus is that they can do the things that really matter really, really well. And what we're seeing is that it's the human things that matter, now more than ever before. And technology also has the opportunity to augment those capabilities, allowing our sellers to be more human than ever.
And that's, as Alice mentioned earlier, where the magic happens. So we've covered our technology revolution. We've really highlighted the human edge. Now let's put these two things together and really paint a picture of, wow, there's a lot of progress going on, but the future is really now. And let's describe for you a new path forward about how technology and humans can play together.
Because undoubtedly, the commercial world is changing. That's where this story started, with a world of accelerating change, which means that we need to change with it. Otherwise, we're going to be left behind. And this isn't a change for 2030, even 2025. This is something that's possible and starts today.
Now, many of you all have different commercial choreography steps, where you look at buyer journeys, sales processes, but we're going to anchor on 5. We're going to walk through and describe for you how today and a little bit of tomorrow, technology and humans can really improve each of these stages. So let's take sales planning. Most of these are going to be some painful things. Joy, sales planning. Let me read all the data from 10 different sources. Let me look at the dashboards that don't really correlate. Let me do a lot of manual entry as a seller and spend a lot of time figuring out where I should focus and my energies and my opportunities. Well, now, those technologies that we've talked about does a lot of that work overnight for them. They come in, here are your priorities, here are where the stages are. We've automated the data entry for you. You're relieving a lot of that burden from a sales planning perspective that gives you greater accuracy in the forecast and a greater visibility into each of these accounts and opportunities stand. And for the seller, that really means
For them, they're free to do the things that are uniquely human. So with sales planning, there's a bit less of this. But when it comes to internal collaboration, there's much more that they can be doing. If we take account planning as an example, and we know that there are lots of things that are going to happen off the back of an account planning conversation, sellers need to be able to exercise influence. And that's something that machines won't necessarily be able to do, and that kind of internal gravitas to make things happen. Now, as we think about carrying over some of this as well into prospecting, we touched on this earlier, but I think really the theme here is that the machines have the opportunity to do some of the things better than our sellers in a way that offloads some of their focus.
The main message here, if your sellers don't want to do it, have the robots do it. That allows your sellers to do the things that the robots can't do. A lot of automation here and a lot of prioritization here.
And there is a human element as well to prospecting as we think about people being here today, actually in a meeting. The event side of things, the video side of things, that's something that won't go away. But it means that they're free to be more selective about how they're spending their time with things like customer meeting preparation as one example.
And with customer meeting prep, having done this before, we've all put together the 25-page PowerPoint decks with data that is wrong, that has to be corrected, that has to be reprinted or redigitalized. The amount of effort of syncing all that content, and in many cases starting from scratch because you didn't like the template that marketing created. The burden that our sellers, the burden of our sellers that they're having to take to prep for those meetings with all the disparate data alleviates. There's technology out there right now, and I've seen it, that gets the deck 90% of the way there. It's pulling the content from your library. It's positioning it to the buyer's needs, and only 10% of the time is now spent by that seller really tailoring it to that specific need. To me, that's one of the most exciting things, because meeting prep, not my stuff.
And I think then for the sellers, it makes them so much smarter as well. It means that then when they get in front of the customer, they've got extra eyes and ears through this meeting preparation so that they can then go in and deliver even more value. So I think one of the things that's so exciting about this is things like conversational analytics. Some of the tools that our sellers can be using in meetings to better understand what they're actually seeing and hearing in that meeting. It augments their ability to be even more human. Let's say, for example, that there's a customer who's spent 90% of the focus with their eyes over here and looking in all these different directions rather than focusing on the conversation. They can then get a view to say, okay, something's not quite landing here. I need to change my response.
The real-in-time meeting engagement is amazing with what conversation intelligence can do. Because it's always been after the fact. Oh, you should have done this, you should have done that. Now the technology is telling you, do this now. Maybe you should slow down a bit, Robert, and not talk so fast. Or your competitor is named, and it gives you all the information on the supporting points and counterpoints that you have. Because now I don't have to think so much. The customer engagement frontier in this commercial choreography has some of the most exciting aspects. We're working with a lot of organizations here just on creating digitally immersive sessions where the customer now comes in and sees their own data in a very visually engaging way. They can automatically manipulate it, which frees up the seller's time to be more of that human, to help highlight their needs, to help connect dots. Customer engagement, as it changes the role of the seller, is one of the most exciting frontiers where we see technology really augmenting the seller behavior. Which then brings us to the dreaded follow-up. As you can see, I don't like any of these stages. Follow-up is things where it falls through the cracks. Now I've got to go enter data into CRM. Now I've got to go and do the actions. Now artificial intelligence automates that data entry. It's recorded the conversation. It puts it in the CRM. It edits it for you. It sends the automated emails out. It does the follow-up for the seller, which then allows that seller.
Means the seller can be even more human. Technology unlocks the potential of our sellers. It allows them to accentuate their uniquely human capabilities more than they ever have done. It's not about replacing our sellers, it's about enhancing them, enhancing those uniquely human capabilities that matter now more than ever before. Now, it's a pretty dramatic reimagining really, of the relationship between sellers, technology, and all of the different ways that we could be working with them. Now, as we think about the next couple of days, we've got some exciting sessions for you. There are really 4 main tracks across this conference, and you can just see a sample of some of the sessions that are going to help you start to take action against this. Now, we're here at every step of the way, of course, to help you do this. But as you think about going back to your organizations, Monday, Thursday, whenever it might be, there are a few imperatives to focus on too.
If you're like me, if you sit in some of these conferences and you're like, wow, Alice, you and Robert just covered a lot of information. What am I supposed to do? We came up with this little chart. So from a technology perspective and a talent perspective, we really encourage you to adopt these imperatives. Really experiment with your technology and change the way you're thinking about it to make it a teammate. And from a talent perspective, really identify and elevate those unique human attributes that they can do. And then again, while that's a strategy, you often ask, okay, but what should I do? Well, tomorrow can be 6 months, 9 months. But this is where we really encourage you to benchmark where your sellers are spending their time. Begin to think about what you can eliminate. And as we move to beyond, when you're back here 1 year at the CSO sales conference for Gartner again, and you're getting to hear me and Alice speak again or someone else, these are some big ideas that you should really begin to think about doing from both a technology perspective and a talent perspective.
There's so much potential here. So many exciting things that we can be taking advantage of. And really, it all starts today, because the future is now. We're so grateful that you're here with us. We're really excited about the next couple of days. And we'd just like to say thank you on the behalf of Gartner for your time.
Our peers are excited to share all the great research and insights that are reinforced from this keynote, along with a variety of other topics. We wish you a great conference, and on behalf of my peers, thank you all for coming.
Thank you.